and welcome once again to our Daily Bread with Tammy and Ed. It's good to see all of you, and I hope that time is passing well where you are, that you are occupied in different kinds of ways, that you're calling on your neighbors, that you are washing your hands frequently, keeping your social distance, coughing into your elbow, staying at home when you can. What was the fifth thing, Tammy? There's five. All you have to do is
don't touch your face.
And don't touch your face. There are five things. All you have to do is bring up Google, and it'll tell you what to do. I'm Ed Hillman, the Director of Ministries at the Givens Communities, and so glad that we are able to be with you. While not physically, at least we're able to be connected with each other as we look into these daily devotions. One of my favorite hymns is by the great churchman and hymn writer Isaac Watts. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. This was Watts's take on Psalm 90. Psalm 90 was really what we call a community lament, a voice crying out in complaint and in grief about the human condition. And it takes a very long view of life. It speaks for multiple generations. And I'd like to read it for you, selected verses. It's also what I think of as a wisdom psalm, because it helps us have a very broad and long view, which is how we gain a heart of wisdom. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn us back to the dust and say, turn back, you mortals. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, or like a watch in the night. You sweep us away. We are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For all our days pass away under your wrath. Our years come to an end like a sigh. The days of our life are 70 years, or perhaps 80 if we are strong. Even then, their span is only toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. So teach us to count our days, that we may gain a wise heart. Turn, O Lord, how long? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and prosper the work of our hands. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. One of my favorite cartoonists was the late Doug Marlette. He was a political cartoonist, but he also wrote a comic strip called Kudzu. And one of the main characters in the Kudzu comic strip was the Reverend Will Be Done. And I remember one time Reverend Dunn is at his church at the altar, and he's kneeling in prayer, and he says, Lord, grant me patience. And in the second panel, he's looking at his watch. And in the third panel, he's saying, well, we live in such a sped up life. Things happen so quickly for us that our patience can wear awfully thin. This psalm, however, takes the viewpoint of a lifespan, even many lifespans. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. I love that image of God being our eternal home, our eternal dwelling place. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. I do love our home here in these southern Appalachian mountains. Every day we are able to look up on some of the oldest mountains in the world and think of God's timeless majesty and how many millions of years these beautiful mountains have seen. This is written, of course, though, for a people who are subsistence farmers, written by people who are often plagued by famine and disease when they are not being attacked by neighboring tribes and their goods and persons being taken away. Life was very precarious for the people of the Bible. And yet, what a beautiful affirmation. You are our dwelling place. Much of this psalm is a meditation on the fragility of the human being, which the psalmist interprets as God's wrath. You know, it is easy for us to think when things are not going right that God is angry with us and God is punishing us. While I don't really think in those kinds of terms, I am sure that there are some people, I don't listen to preachers on the radio, but I could guess that there are some who are preaching right now about this pandemic being some kind of judgment of God upon us. And I suspect when preachers preach that kind of thing, it's really about other people and not about ourselves, not about the good people, but about those other people. As I said, I really don't tend to think in those terms. But it is certainly true that when things go wrong for us, those of us who are religious people sometimes wonder, is God not angry with us for some reason? And that is certainly the perspective of the psalmist here. The psalmist says we live only around 70 years or 80 years if we are strong. Now, I have to remind you that in Bible days, years were counted very differently. Indeed, lifespan back in Bible days was only 30 to 35 years. Someone 40 years old would have been considered an older person. So these years, 70 years and 80 years, are more like our lifespan. Our lifespan did not really begin to increase until the 19th century, when we became more educated about medicine and hygiene. Then our lifespan began to increase, but it was low for many years, including those Bible days. But numbers like 70, 80, 90 years, these years are plausible for us today. As a matter of fact, another one of our residents turned 100 years old last week. Though that's becoming even somewhat mundane. I note that Willard Scott does not even announce our centenarians anymore on the Today Show because there are more and more of them. And yet, the psalmist says, their span is only toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. It wasn't until the 20th century that people really even began to think in terms of a lifespan that would include retirement. That is a different thing for us today. Teach us to number our days, or as I like to put it, remind us that our days are numbered. When we are able to see the totality of our lives and consider the ending of our lives, that is when we actually gain hearts of wisdom. The last part of the psalm is simply a plea for better things to come. And at one point he says, "Let your glory be seen to our children." I guess it's always a concern of one generation to the next that their children are able to see what God has done for us. Prosper the work of our hands is a plea for meaning and purpose in the work that we do. All of us have had times when we have wondered, do I or did I make a difference in this world? Am I able to see it? Am I able to affirm it? That's what the closing prayer is about. Richard Rohr, one of my teachers in my adult years, says that the second part of life, sometimes that may even be the last few hours, is an exploration of that very question. What was the meaning of my life? What was my life about? Lent is a good time for us to explore that question. And I want to end with a prayer that is the last verse of Isaac Watts' poem. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, be thou our guide while life shall last, and our eternal home. Amen. Friends, be well and be at peace.